The stars looked peaceful from Prosperity Station's observation deck, where Sarah Chun pressed her small hand against the transparent, aluminum viewport and watched distant suns twinkle in the endless black. Her mother stood behind her, tired from a double shift in the Mayan control center, but smiling because moments like these made the frontier life worthwhile. "Mommy, which one is Earth?" Sarah asked, and her mother pointed toward a cluster of lights barely visible in the galactic arm. "That way, sweetheart, about 40 light years from here," she said softly. Prosperity Station spun slowly in the void. A massive wheel of metal and hope, housing 50,000 souls who had come to the edge of known space, seeking fortune in the asteroid belts rich with rare minerals. Families lived here. Children attended school here. People fell in love and grew old here. It was home. Far from Earth, but connected by the invisible threads of human ambition and dreams. The station had no weapons. No shields, no defenses beyond basic meteor deflection systems. The Galactic Concordat, that grand alliance of star-faring species, had strict laws about militarization. And humanity had signed those treaties eagerly after gaining admission to the galactic community a century ago. Desperate to prove they were civilized and peaceful, Marcus Webb sat in the communications hub monitoring routine traffic when his screens flickered. Something was wrong with the long-range array. Signals dropping out one by one, like lights extinguishing across a city. "Control, we're losing external comms," he reported. Fingers dancing across his console trying to restore connections that simply vanished before anyone could respond. The first explosion rocked the station. A mining platform on the outer ring simply disappeared in a flash of superheated plasma that sent shockwaves through the connected structures. Alarms screamed throughout Prosperity Station. People stumbled from their quarters, confused and terrified, as emergency lights bathed corridors in red. Sarah's mother grabbed her daughter and ran toward the evacuation pods, while bulkheads began sealing automatically through the viewport. Sarah saw the massive ships unlike anything in human design, angular and predatory, colored in shades of dark green and bronze that seemed to drink in the starlight. They moved with terrible purpose toward the station, weapons ports glowing with charging energy. The Creth Dominion had come hunting. Reptilian warriors had calculated this attack carefully. Intelligence reports confirmed Prosperity Station was civilian, defenseless, isolated perfect prey to demonstrate their power and intimidate humanity into surrendering resource-rich systems along the border. Their warrior code found no honor in attacking those who could not fight back, but culling the weak was simply practical evolution. Creth warships surrounded the station in a loose sphere. Their first volleys were precise, eliminating the communication arrays completely so no distress signal could escape into the void. No cry for help could reach human space. Then they began the methodical destruction. Plasma cannons punched through the station's hull in dozens of places. Atmosphere vented in screaming torrents, carrying furniture, equipment, and people into the vacuum. Entire sections decompressed in seconds, and those inside had no time even to understand what was happening before the cold and airless void claimed them. Marcus stayed at his post, trying desperately to send any signal, any message, but every channel was dead. He watched helplessly as surveillance feeds showed Creth boarding parties moving through breach sections, their armored forms towering over human colonists who begged for mercy that would never come in one corridor. An elderly couple held each other as a bulkhead failed. In another, a teacher tried to shield her students with her own body when the ceiling collapsed. Everywhere, the story was the same: civilians facing military, might with nothing but hope and prayer. Sarah and her mother reached an evacuation pod. Dozens of others crowded in, parents clutching children, the injured helping the injured. The pod sealed and launched, but made it only 100 meters before a Creth fighter spotted it and fired. The pod became an expanding cloud of debris and frozen bodies throughout the station. Similar scenes played out. Evacuation became impossible as the Kreth systematically destroyed every escape route, every shuttle, every possible means of fleeing. They wanted no survivors, no witnesses, only a message written in blood and wreckage. Captain Ramos of the smuggler ship Wayfarers Luck had been docked at a remote mining tunnel for what he called unofficial cargo transfers when the attack began. His first instinct was to flee, engines screaming to life, but his co-pilot grabbed his arm. "The civilians, we can't just leave them." Ramos cursed. He was a criminal, not a hero, but something in the terror-filled screams over the open channels made him human again. He maneuvered the Wayfarer toward breached sections where people were still alive. Using the mining tunnel's exit as cover, they managed to pull aboard 200 survivors burned, injured, traumatized souls who had watched their neighbors and families die. Among them was Marcus Webb, who had escaped the communications hub just before it was destroyed. And he carried one precious thing: a data chip with partial footage of the attack, recorded by automated security cameras. "We need to go now," the co-pilot shouted as Kreth fighters began sweeping their sector. The Wayfarer's Luck lived up to its name. Ramos pushed the ship beyond safe limits, engines redlining as they dove into the maze of mining tunnels that honeycombed the asteroid field surrounding Prosperity Station. The Kreth pursued, but the smuggler knew these rocks like his own ship. Weaving through passages too narrow for military vessels, they broke free of the asteroid field and jumped to hyperspace, just as a Kreth destroyer acquired weapons lock. Behind them, Prosperity Station died its final death. The main reactor detonated in a blast visible for light years, erasing any remaining evidence except twisted metal and frozen corpses. The journey to the nearest human outpost took 3 weeks. During that time, the survivors huddled together, sharing their trauma, while Marcus Webb watched the security footage over and over, each viewing making him more hollow inside. Sarah Chen was dead. Her mother was dead. 49,800 souls were gone when the Wayfarer finally limped into Armstrong Station's docking bay. The survivors stumbled out into a universe that didn't yet know what had happened. Marcus walked directly to the military liaison office and placed the data chip on the desk. "You need to see this," he said, his voice empty of everything except cold rage. "You need to see what they did." The officer inserted the chip. Her face went pale as she watched children's bodies floating in vacuum, families clutching each other as bulkheads failed, elderly colonists begging for mercy before being executed by Kreth warriors who showed none. News of the massacre spread through human space like wildfire, jumping from tree to tree in a dry forest. Every colony, every station, every ship received the footage. Humanity watched in collective horror as their worst nightmare became reality. They were not safe. The Galactic Concordat's laws were meaningless, and predators walked among the stars wearing the mask of civilization. Something changed in the human spirit that day. Something cold and ancient awoke from its century-long slumber. Something that remembered Earth's bloody history and the hard lessons written in the ashes of total war. The age of human innocence ended with Prosperity Station. What came next would teach the galaxy why humanity had once nearly destroyed itself, and why that same capacity for total warfare made them the most dangerous species alive when properly motivated in government chambers on Earth, in military headquarters on Mars, and colony assemblies throughout human space. The same question echoed. What would humanity's response be? And every answer arrived at the same terrible conclusion: mercy was a gift given to those who showed mercy. The Kreth had shown none, so none would they receive. The Galactic Council Chamber stood as a monument to peaceful cooperation, a vast sphere where hundreds of species had gathered for 3 centuries to resolve disputes through dialogue rather than warfare. Crystalline seats arranged in concentric circles held representatives from across known space. each species proud of their contribution to galactic civilization. Ambassador Tkash of the Kreth Dominion entered the emergency session with confidence bordering on arrogance. His scales gleamed under the chamber's lights, dark green and bronze, marking him as a warrior caste member. He carried himself with the certainty of someone who understood power dynamics and knew his species held significant military strength. The human ambassador, Director Elizabeth Park, waited in her assigned seat with unusual stillness. Normally, she engaged in the pre-session diplomacy, the small talk and alliance building that lubricated galactic politics. But today, she simply sat with her hands folded, watching the Kreth ambassador with eyes that showed nothing. The council elder, a methane-breathing philosopher from the ancient Vorloth collective, opened the session with traditional calls for calm and measured response. The massacre at Prosperity Station had shocked the galaxy, yes, but surely civilized species could find a path forward through negotiation and compensation. The Kreth Dominion wishes to address this regrettable incident, Cash announced, his translator rendering his hissing speech into clear standard. Our military forces encountered what our intelligence incorrectly identified as a strategic target, a tragic miscalculation for which we offer a compensation of 10 million credits and formal condolences. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. 10 million credits was substantial by galactic standards, enough to rebuild infrastructure and provide for survivors' families. Several species nodded approvingly at this gesture of reconciliation. Director Park stood slowly. She carried a small data projector in her hands, and when she reached the central speaking platform, she activated it without preamble. The holographic display filled the chamber's center with horrifying clarity security footage from Prosperity Station showing the attack in unedited, raw detail. Children's bodies tumbling through breached halls in the vacuum, their small forms freezing instantly in the cold. Families holding each other as atmosphere vented, faces contorted in final moments of terror. Elderly colonists on their knees, begging Kreth warriors for mercy before being executed with casual efficiency. The footage continued for 5 full minutes. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The chamber trapped in collective horror at the reality of what regrettable miscalculation actually meant. When the display finally ended, silence held the chamber like a physical weight. 49,800 civilians, Director Park said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Perfectly calm and utterly devoid of emotion. Miners, families, children, elderly, scientists, none armed, none capable of resistance. All slaughtered methodically over the course of 6 hours while they begged for mercy. Kesh shifted uncomfortably. The footage was far more damaging than he had anticipated. The emotional impact on other species obvious in their body language. The Dominion acknowledges the tragedy, he began. But Park cut him off with a raised hand. The Galactic Concordat's authority over human military affairs is hereby revoked, she stated flatly. Earth Fleet will handle this matter internally. Good day, Council. She walked toward the exit. Pandemonium erupted behind her as representatives shouted questions, demands, threats. But Park never looked back. The council elder's voice boomed through the chamber. Ambassador Park, you cannot unilaterally withdraw from treaty obligations. The Concordat required you to prevent exactly this kind of atrocity. Park's voice echoed back from the entrance. You failed, we won't. The massive doors closed behind her with terrible finality. What? The Galactic Council didn't know what Park had successfully hidden throughout her 5 years as ambassador was that humanity had never truly demilitarized. They had simply become very creative with definitions and very patient with long-term planning. The treaties forbade military fleets and weapons platforms, so humanity built deep space research vessels that happened to be armed and capable of military operations. They constructed asteroid mining platforms in remote systems that were actually mobile fortress foundries churning out weapons and ammunition. Their commercial navigation network was a military-grade communications grid that could coordinate fleet movements across light years for 80 years. Ever since signing the Concordat, humanity had prepared. They hoped for peace, genuinely pursued diplomatic solutions. But they remembered Earth's own history too well, the wars that had nearly destroyed their species, the hard lessons written in nuclear fire and chemical weapons, the understanding that weakness invited aggression. Admiral Chun Zhao received her activation orders while reviewing tactical simulations at Fleet Command on Mars. She was 68 years old, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion 30 years prior, holder of the Solar Cross for extraordinary valor, and Earth's most respected military mind. The orders came directly from the civilian government with unprecedented unanimity. Every nation on Earth, every colony in human space, every representative body had voted the same way. Find every Kreth military asset and eliminate it. Show no mercy to those who wage war on the defenseless gen. Study the intelligence reports flooding in from human assets across the galaxy. For decades, human traders, diplomats, scientists, and tourists had quietly mapped Kreth space, identified military installations, tracked fleet movements, cultivated sources, all under the guise of peaceful commerce and cultural exchange. Now that investment would pay its terrible dividend. How many ships can we mobilize? Chun asked her staff. 312 capital ships. Another 800 support vessels, all positioned and ready. Her chief of staff replied. The crews have been on standby since the Prosperity Station footage broke. Morale is extremely high. Chun nodded. High morale was both an asset and a danger. She needed controlled fury, not blind rage. Send the following to all fleet commanders, she said, her voice hard as titanium. We are not conducting a war of conquest or revenge. We are conducting a military elimination campaign. Kreth military assets are to be identified, engaged, and destroyed. Civilian casualties are to be minimized wherever possible. We are not monsters. We are executioners. There is a difference. The orders transmitted across light years through humanity's hidden military network. In deep space, research vessels transformed. Armor plating extending from concealed compartments, weapon ports opening. Engines switching from commercial efficiency to military power in asteroid belts. Mining platforms revealed their true nature. Production lines that had quietly manufactured missiles and torpedoes for decades now operated at maximum capacity. Fighter craft emerged from camouflaged hangars carved into asteroids. Their pilots eager and grim throughout human space. The transformation was total and terrifying. A species that had presented itself as peaceful traders and explorers for a century suddenly revealed it'd been a sleeping giant. And now the giant was fully awake and coldly furious on Earth. In the Grand Plaza, where humanity had celebrated joining the Galactic Concordat a century before, millions gathered around holographic displays showing fleet movements. This time, there were no celebrations. Only quiet determination and hard faces. Old woman stood at the memorial being constructed for Prosperity Station's victims, reading the names being projected as they were confirmed. Sarah Chun. Age 7 Rebecca Chun. Age 34 Marcus Webb. Engineer. The list scrolled endlessly. Make them pay, she whispered to the stars. Make them understand what they've done. Across human civilization, the sentiment was universal. They had tried peace, tried diplomacy, tried trust, and 49,800 of their people had died screaming in the void. Admiral Chun watched her fleet assemble. 300 warships that officially didn't exist, crewed by personnel who were supposedly civilian scientists, armed with weapons that had never been registered with any galactic authority. All ships report ready. Admiral, her communications officer announced. Chen took a breath. She had studied Earth's military history extensively, knew the mistakes of generals who had let passion overwhelm tactics, who had sacrificed victory for vengeance. This would be different. This would be calculated, methodical, unstoppable. Execute Operation Reckoning, she ordered. Show them why humanity doesn't need to be the strongest species. We just need to be the most determined. The first wave of Earth fleet vanished into hyperspace, hunting Kreth military forces with targeting data accumulated over decades. The galaxy would learn a hard lesson about the difference between appearance and reality. Between peaceful and harmless, humanity had been peaceful by choice, not necessity, and now that choice was revoked. Commander Vasith of the Kreth patrol cruiser Dominant Fang had served in the Dominion fleet for 20 cycles, fought in border skirmishes against 6 different species, and earned 17 honor marks for victories in combat. He considered himself an experienced warrior who understood how inferior species fought his. Sensors detected 3 human ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of his patrol. Zone small frigates according to his tactical display. Probably scout vessels sent to probe Kreth defenses. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth, and ordered his cruiser to intercept. They run like prey, his tactical officer observed, as the human ships detected the Dominant Fang and began accelerating away. Of course they fear superior warriors. Vexith replied confidently, pursue and destroy them. Let the humans learn the price of their insolence. The Dominant Fang was larger, more heavily armed, and faster than any of the 3 human frigates. Vexith watched with satisfaction as the distance closed, his weapons coming into effective range. Then the human ships split apart in 3 different directions, and 6 more appeared from behind a nearby moon, where they had been hiding in silent running mode. Engines cold and sensors passive. Multiple contacts, 9 hostiles total. The tactical officer shouted, but by then it was too late. The human wolf pack had sprung their trap. Missiles streaked from all 9 frigates simultaneously, overwhelming the Dominant Fang's point defense systems. Torpedoes followed, their warheads designed specifically to penetrate Kreth armor based on decades of intelligence gathering. Vext had time for one final thought. These were not frightened prey, but coordinated hunters. Before his ship exploded in a brilliant flash that faded quickly in the void throughout Kreth space. Similar engagements played out with horrifying consistency. Human forces refused to mass for the traditional fleet battles the Kreth expected, instead operating in small groups that appeared, struck, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Jiang commanded one such wolf pack, 3 frigates and a destroyer that had eliminated 8 Kreth vessels in as many days. Her tactics were simple but effective. Identify isolated targets using intelligence provided by human networks. Approach from multiple vectors, strike with overwhelming firepower. Disappear before enemy reinforcements arrived. Intelligence reports a Kreth supply convoy entering the Tertian system, her operations officer announced. 4 cargo haulers escorted by 2 light cruisers. Jiang studied the tactical plot. Supply convoys were legitimate military target ships carrying ammunition, fuel, and equipment to Kreth fleet concentrations. Set intercept course, she ordered. Standard pack formation, we going fast and loud. Maximum violence of action. Her small fleet dropped from hyperspace directly into the convoy's path. The Kreth cruisers immediately moved to screen the cargo ships. But Jiang had studied their doctrine extensively. Kreth warriors prioritized honor and personal glory, which made them predictable. Her destroyer engaged 1 cruiser directly, trading fire in what appeared to be a straightforward duel. Meanwhile, her 3 frigates bypassed the engagement entirely and tore into the cargo vessels with railguns and missiles. Convoy was destroyed in 4 minutes. The Kreth cruisers fought bravely but died without protecting their charges. Victims of tactics that prioritize results over glory. This pattern repeated throughout Kreth space human forces targeted patrol vessels, supply lines, communications relays, refueling stations, repair facilities, and isolated outposts. Every element of Kreth military infrastructure became prey for human hunters, who showed neither mercy nor hesitation. The Kreth High Command tried to adapt. They pulled their patrols back to stronger defensive positions, concentrated their fleets, fortified key systems, but this only made the isolated targets more isolated and the supply lines. Longer Admiral Chun watched the tactical displays from her command ship in orbit around Mars, monitoring dozens of engagements simultaneously. Her forces were executing the campaign exactly as planned, patient, methodical, relentless. Kreth casualties now exceed 60% of their forward-deployed forces, her intelligence chief reported. Their outer colonies are requesting military protection that the High Command cannot provide. What about civilian casualties? Chun asked sharply. Minimal. Our forces are following engagement protocols strictly. 3 incidents where Kreth commanders tried to use civilian infrastructure as shields, but our units simply established blockades and waited them out. Chun nodded with satisfaction. She wanted the galaxy to understand that humans could wage war with precision and control, that their fury was cold and calculated rather than blind. Rage. The Galactic Council convened again in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species demanded that humanity cease operations immediately and return to negotiation. Director Park attended this time, but her response was broadcast not just to the Council, but to every inhabited system. In known space, we gave the Galactic Concordat a century to prevent atrocities. It failed. We gave the Kreth Dominion opportunities to surrender those responsible for murdering our civilians. They refused. We will cease military operations when every Kreth vessel capable of harming defenseless populations is eliminated. Not before. She paused, letting that sink in throughout the galaxy. We recommend that Kreth civilian populations evacuate from military zones. Human forces will not deliberately target civilians, but neither will we allow military forces to hide behind them. The Kreth military chose to wage war on the defenseless. Now, they will experience what it means to face an opponent who fights back. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, species that had considered humanity weak and idealistic reassessed that judgment dramatically on the Kreth homeworld. Panic spread through the civilian population. News reports showed human fleets dismantling their military piece by methodical piece, destroying decades of military buildup in a matter of months. High Commander Zrathic addressed his warrior council with growing desperation. How can they sustain such operations? Where are these ships coming from? Our intelligence reported minimal human military capability. They lied, his intelligence chief admitted, the words tasting like ash. For 80 years they built a secret fleet while pretending to be peaceful merchants. Every research vessel was a warship. Every mining platform, a weapons foundry. Every trade route, a military supply line. Zrathic's claws scraped against his command throne. The humans had played a game far longer and more patiently than Kreth military doctrine considered possible. We must defend the core worlds, he declared. Pull all remaining fleets back to Kreth Prime. Establish a defensive sphere that no human force can penetrate. The orders went out. Kreth military forces throughout the frontier abandoned their positions and retreated toward their homeworld. Leaving colonies and outposts, defenseless human forces watched them go. Admiral Chun smiled grimly as her intelligence network reported the Kreth retreat. They're doing exactly what we expected, she told her staff. Abandoning the periphery to defend the core, which means we've already won the campaign. They just don't realize it yet? Should we pursue immediately? Her chief of staff asked. No, Chun replied. Let them gather their strength at Kreth Prime. Let them feel safe behind their fortifications. Then we'll show them the difference between defending territory and being trapped. Throughout human space, the population followed the campaign's progress with grim satisfaction. Memorial services were held for Prosperity Station's victims, and at each service the same vow was repeated. Never again would humanity's innocent be slaughtered without consequence. Marcus Webb attended one such service on Armstrong Station. Standing before a holographic display showing Sarah Chun's smiling face, along with thousands of others who had died. He had survived the massacre, but part of him had died in the wreckage of Prosperity Station. "They're running," someone next to him muttered. Watching news feeds showing Kreth retreat. "Good," Webb replied quietly. "Let them run all the way home. It just means Earth fleet won't have to chase them as far." In deep space, human wolf packs continued their hunt. Kreth ships that didn't retreat fast enough were eliminated, their wreckage left as markers of humanity's cold fury. Supply depots were destroyed, communications networks dismantled, defensive installations reduced to debris. The Kreth Dominion, which had terrorized the galactic frontier for generations, was being systematically dismantled by a species they had dismissed as weak pacifists. High Commander Zrathic watched his forces gather at Kreth Prime 200 warships, the cream of the Dominion's military, supported by extensive orbital fortifications and planetary defense systems. It was the largest concentration of Kreth military power in their history. "Let the humans come," he declared. "Here we will show them that Kreth warriors do not break. Here we will make them bleed for every meter of space." But Admiral Chun had no intention of feeding human lives into Kreth defenses. She had studied every major siege in human history, learned the lessons of Leningrad and Masada, understood that fortifications only worked if the besieged could be relieved or supplied, and she intended to ensure that Kreth Prime received neither. Earthfleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kreth Prime system, like a steel curtain falling across the stars. 250 warships arranged themselves in carefully calculated formations, their sensors painting the inner system with active scans that mapped every defense, every ship, every potential threat. High Commander Zrathic watched the human fleet's arrival from his command center deep beneath Kreth Prime's capital city. His tactical displays showed the enemy positions with clinical precision. They had stopped at the outer system boundary, well beyond the range of his planet-based weapons. "They fear our defenses?" his tactical officer suggested hopefully. "No," Zrathic replied. Studying the formation patterns, "They're establishing a blockade. They mean to trap us here." Over the following days, his assessment proved horrifyingly accurate. Human ships moved with patient precision, seeding the system's approaches with thousands of automated mines, each one networked to its neighbors in a web of overlapping sensor coverage and coordinated fire patterns. Kreth ships that attempted to break out were detected immediately. Human wolf packs appeared as if from nowhere. They had been hiding in silent running mode among the asteroid fields and debris clouds and eliminated the escapees with brutal efficiency. "We have supplies for 2 years," Zrathic's logistics officer reported. "The homeworld is self-sufficient for food. Our orbital manufacturing can produce ammunition, and our fleet is intact. We can wait them out." Zrathic wanted to believe that, but something about the human approach troubled him. They had proven themselves patient and methodical, not the kind of warriors who would establish a siege they couldn't win 3 months past with no major engagements. Human forces maintained their blockade with machine-like precision, rotating ships through their formations, resupplying from mobile bases they had established in the outer system, giving every appearance of being prepared to wait indefinitely. Kreth propaganda broadcasts claimed victory. "The humans dare not attack our fortified homeworld. They sit in the outer, dark like cowards while we remain strong and defiant. Soon they will grow tired and withdraw." The civilian population wanted desperately to believe this. Markets reopened. Children returned to schools. Life attempted to return to normal under the shadow of occupation, but beneath the surface, human intelligence operatives embedded in Kreth society for years through cultural exchange programs, trade missions, and diplomatic postings began activating carefully cultivated networks. Civilian technicians who had secretly provided data to human traders now stepped up their efforts. Manufacturing schedules for military equipment began appearing in human intelligence databases. Deployment patterns for Kreth fleet rotations were transmitted through hidden communication channels. Detailed maps of military command bunkers worked their way into Earth fleet planning sessions. Then, humanity demonstrated why they were called the patient killers. The first strike was surgical and precise. A spread of kinetic missiles launched from beyond detection range, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, and impacted 3 Kreth military communication satellites in orbit over Kreth Prime. The satellites disintegrated, and suddenly the unified planetary defense network had gaps in its coverage. Kreth engineers worked frantically to restore connections through backup systems, but before they could succeed, another wave of missiles eliminated orbital weapons platforms positioned to defend those very gaps. They're dissecting our defenses, Zrathic realized with growing horror. Piece by piece, layer by layer, they're not trying to overwhelm us. They're trying to systematically dismantle us. His analysis was correct. Admiral Chun had no intention of launching costly frontal assaults against fortified positions. Instead, she directed precision strikes against specific nodes in the Kreth military. Infrastructure shipyard facilities in high orbit, where damaged Kreth vessels could be repaired, were reduced to debris by long-range torpedo strikes. The humans accepted that civilian structures nearby might be damaged by secondary effects, but they never targeted civilian areas directly. Command and control satellites that coordinated fleet movements were eliminated, forcing Kreth ships to rely on slower and less efficient direct communication supply depots hidden in the asteroid belt were discovered. Human intelligence was terrifyingly comprehensive and destroyed before Kreth forces could even respond. Each strike followed the same pattern: precise, minimal, calculated to degrade military capability without creating mass civilian casualties. When Kreth ships broke formation to respond to these strikes, human wolf packs that had been waiting in ambush positions eliminated them. The ships would venture out expecting to chase off hit-and-run raiders, only to find themselves facing coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Over 6 months, the Kreth fleet defending their homeworld shrank from 200 ships to 140, then to 90. Each loss represented not just a vessel, but trained crew, irreplaceable experience, and diminishing hope. As Zrathic tried everything. He ordered his ships to stay in tight defensive formations, but that made them predictable targets for human long-range strikes. He dispersed them to cover more approaches, but then wolf packs picked them off individually. He tried to hide ships among civilian traffic, but the humans simply waited, their patience apparently infinite. Meanwhile, human propaganda broadcasts began flooding Kreth civilian networks. The jamming that had blocked external communications for months mysteriously failed. Human intelligence operatives had sabotaged the blocking systems from within. People of the Kreth Dominion, Director Park's voice announced in perfect Kreth language. Your military leadership chose to attack our defenseless civilians, 49,800 murdered without mercy or justification. The broadcast showed footage of Prosperity Station's destruction again, but this time it also showed the faces of the victims. Children, families, elderly, real individuals with names and stories. Not just statistics. Your government hides behind your cities and claims we threaten civilians, Park continued. This is false. Earth fleet has maintained surgical precision throughout this campaign. Every military target we have eliminated was precisely that: military. We do not wage war on the innocent. The broadcast shifted to show statistics. Kreth military casualties 70%. Kreth civilian casualties less than 300. All from secondary effects of strikes on military targets. Your leaders have a choice. Surrender the warships and those responsible for ordering the massacre at Prosperity Station, and civilian populations will be unharmed. Continue resisting, and your military will be dismantled piece by piece until nothing remains but debris and memories. The message repeated on every channel. Kreth civilians who had been told the humans were savage monsters watched in confusion as the evidence showed restraint, precision, and a clear distinction between military and civilian targets. Cracks began forming in Kreth society. Protest movements emerged in civilian sectors demanding the military leadership surrender rather than doom everyone to slow strangulation. The civilians grow restless. Zerathic's security chief reported, "There have been demonstrations in 3 major cities, people demanding we negotiate. We are warriors. We do not surrender." Zerathic roared, but his words rang hollow even to himself. He could see the tactical situation with brutal clarity. His fleet was being whittled away. His orbital infrastructure was gone. His supply lines were cut. And the humans showed every indication of being willing to maintain the siege for years if necessary. Worse, human intelligence seemed to know everything. Every time he repositioned ships, human strikes hit the newly vacated positions hours later, as if the enemy knew his plans before he finished making them. "We have traitors among us," his intelligence chief admitted. "The humans have cultivated sources throughout our society, technicians, bureaucrats, even some military personnel. They've been planning this for decades." Zerathic slumped in his command throne. The Dominion had been outplayed at every level militarily, strategically, informationally. They had attacked what they thought was weak prey, and discovered too late it was a predator that had simply been pretending to sleep. "How long can we hold?" he asked quietly. "Supplies will last another year," his logistics officer replied. "But fleet strength continues to decline at current attrition rates. We'll be down to fewer than 50 operational warships within 6 months. 50 warships to defend an entire star system against an enemy that had proven it could destroy them at will in his private quarters that night." Zerathic reviewed intelligence reports on human military history. He learned about their world wars, their nuclear standoffs, their proxy conflicts and brushfire wars, a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of total warfare against itself. He finally understood. Humanity hadn't been weak. They had been restrained, and once that restraint was removed, they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy precisely because they understood war with a depth no other species could match. The next morning, low-ranking military officers, younger warriors, who had families in the civilian sectors, approached him with a proposal that would have been unthinkable months before. Negotiate surrender while terms were still available, as Wrath arrested them for cowardice. But more came. The rot was spreading throughout his command structure, fed by human propaganda. The military coup came at dawn on Kreth Prime. Junior officers led by Commander Sekthar, whose family had lived in one of the civilian sectors that had suffered collateral damage from a human strike, arrested High Commander Zerathic and his senior staff in a bloodless takeover. Enough. Sekthar had told his fellow conspirators the night before, "Our leader's pride will get us all killed. The humans have proven they can dismantle our entire military without even landing troops on our planet. We can continue this futile resistance and watch our civilization crumble. Or we can accept reality." Reality was harsh. The Kreth Dominion's military was shattered, their economy in ruins from the blockade, their civilian population terrified and divided. Continuing the war served no purpose except to guarantee their complete destruction. Seka sent a simple message to Admiral Chun's flagship. The Kreth Provisional Military Council requests terms for unconditional surrender. Admiral Chun received the message in her ready room. She had been reviewing casualty reports. Her forces had lost 18 ships and 4,000 personnel during the 8-month campaign. Tragic numbers, but far fewer than any major human war in history. Draft the surrender document, she told her staff. Terms are non-negotiable. All Kreth military vessels to be surrendered to neutral parties for decommissioning. Those responsible for ordering and executing the Prosperity Station massacre to be handed over for trial under human jurisdiction. Kreth military forces to be reduced to system defense, only 20 patrol boats maximum. UN peacekeeping forces to monitor compliance for 50 years. The terms were transmitted. 3 hours later, Commander Sekthar accepted them on behalf of the Provisional Council. Formal surrender ceremony took place in neutral space, a demilitarized zone between Kreth and human territory that had been administered by the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species attended to witness this historic moment. Commander Sekthar arrived aboard a small diplomatic vessel, escorted by human frigates. He looked tired and defeated, his scales dull with the stress of the past months. He carried no weapons, wore no armor, presented himself not as a warrior, but as a representative of a broken people. Admiral Chun waited aboard the human heavy cruiser Determination, surrounded by her staff and a guard of honor. When Sekthar entered the conference room, she did not gloat or posture. She simply nodded with respect to a defeated opponent who had shown wisdom in knowing when to end a war. Commander Sekthar, you have agreed to the terms of surrender. Chun asked formally. We have, Sekthar replied, his translator rendering his words with a hollow tone. All military vessels will be transferred to Galactic Council custody within 30 days. We have compiled a complete list of command personnel involved in the Prosperity Station operation. They will be turned over to your custody for trial. Chun studied the list. 43 names, from the admiral who had ordered the attack to the ship captains who had executed it. These individuals will receive fair trials under human law, Chun stated. They will be provided legal representation, the right to present evidence, and all protections afforded to prisoners of war. More mercy than they showed our civilians, Sekthar said bitterly. Why do you offer justice when vengeance would be simpler? Chun met his eyes. Because we want the galaxy to understand the difference between us and those who attack the defenseless. We are not monsters. We are a civilization that values law and justice. But we are also a civilization that will enforce those values with absolute determination when necessary. The surrender documents were signed. Over the following weeks, Kreth warships began arriving at the designated collection points, massive dreadnoughts and small patrol craft alike. Their crews filing off in silence while human personnel took control. Each ship was carefully documented, then escorted to shipyards where they were systematically dismantled under the supervision of Galactic Council observers. The hulls were cut apart, weapons removed, engines disabled, the physical manifestation of the Kreth Dominion's military power reduced to salvage metal. The trials of the Prosperity Station perpetrators took place on Mars, broadcast throughout the galaxy. Human prosecutors presented the security footage, survivor testimony, and military orders that documented the deliberate massacre of civilian Kreth defense attorneys appointed by the human court system argued that their clients had followed lawful military orders and attacked what they believed to be a legitimate target. The arguments were heard with patience and seriousness. The verdict was never in doubt. 43 Kreth military personnel were found guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and murder. 43 executions were carried out by lethal injection. Quick and painless, more mercy than they had shown Sarah Chun and 49,799 others. Throughout the trials, Director Park had attended every session. She wanted the convicted to see the face of human justice before they died. Wanted them to understand the price of their actions. After the final execution, a reporter approached her. Ambassador, some species are calling humanity's campaign against the Kreth excessive. What is your response? Park looked at the camera directly. 49,800 civilians were murdered in 6 hours. Children, families, elderly, all defenseless. Our response was to eliminate the military capability that committed this atrocity while minimizing civilian casualties on both sides. We gave the Kreth military every opportunity to surrender. We conducted precision strikes rather than indiscriminate bombardment. We provided fair trials under law. If that is excessive, then the galaxy has lost all sense of proportional justice. Years passed. The rebuilt Prosperity Station emerged from construction, a newer, larger facility with defensive shields, weapons platforms, and a permanent Earth fleet garrison of 20 warships. The memorial stood at the station's heart, a vast wall of crystalline material with 49,800 names etched in permanent light. Admiral Chun attended the dedication ceremony. Now retired, but still honored as the architect of humanity's most successful military campaign. She stood before the memorial, reading names that scrolled past in alphabetical order. Chun. Sarah, age 7 Chun. Rebecca, age 34 Collins James. Age 62. Admiral Chun. A young reporter called out, holding a microphone. Some in the galaxy still question whether your campaign was necessary. Do you have any regrets? Chun turned to face the cameras. She was 75 now, her hair white and face lined with the weight of command decisions. But her eyes remained sharp and clear. The Kreth Dominion gave us a choice, she said slowly. Choosing each word with care, we could accept that violence against the innocent would go unpunished. Teaching every predator species in the galaxy that humans were acceptable targets. Or we could ensure it never happened again by demonstrating the cost of such actions. She paused, looking back at the memorial wall. Every name on that wall represents a failure of diplomacy, of deterrence, of the Galactic Concordat to protect the innocent. We chose to ensure those names would not be repeated. We chose to show the galaxy that humanity will tolerate disagreement, competition, even insults, but never, ever will we tolerate deliberate violence against those who cannot defend themselves. But the campaign was so ruthless. The reporter pressed. No, Chung corrected firmly. Ruthless implies lack of control. Our campaign was controlled, calculated, and constrained by rules of engagement designed to minimize harm to civilians. Ruthless was what the Kreth did here. What we did was justice delivered with precision. She gestured toward the defensive platforms orbiting the station. These defenses exist because we learned that peace through trust is insufficient. You must also have peace through strength. The galaxy now understands both aspects of humanity. We prefer trade and cooperation. But we are absolutely capable of defending our people with total commitment. In the years that followed, not a single human civilian target was attacked by any species. The lesson of Prosperity Station and the Kreth campaign had been learned across the galaxy. Humanity was patient, preferred peaceful solutions, invested in diplomacy and cultural exchange, but if you harmed their defenseless, you would face a response that was both terrible and unstoppable. The Kreth themselves slowly rebuilt under UN supervision. Their military remained restricted to system defense, but their civilian sectors were allowed to trade and develop. Many Kreth came to appreciate the human approach: harsh justice, but not genocide. Punishment for the guilty, but not collective retribution. Commander Sekthar, who had led the coup that ended the war, became the Kreth representative to the Galactic Council. In his first speech, he addressed the assembly with uncomfortable honesty. My people made a terrible mistake. We confused humanity's preference for peace with inability to wage war. We attacked civilians because we thought there would be no consequence. We learned that consequence can be delivered with precision and determination by a species that understands warfare better than any of us. He paused. Looking directly at Director Park, humanity did not destroy the Kreth people. They destroyed our capacity to harm others while leaving our civilization intact. They taught us that actions have consequences and justice, though sometimes delayed, is inevitable. For this harsh lesson, I believe my people owe them thanks.